Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World with me, Hashim Kumar. Joining us is Maciej Wilowski, economics correspondent at TVP World, to break down Germany's growth outlook and what it means for Poland and Central and Eastern Europe. Friedrich Merz's Gulf visit and Bulgaria's path towards joining the euro at a pivotal moment for the region. Maciej, welcome to
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. Right, so let's start with the finance ministers of Poland and Germany. They've had a meeting. Let's watch a short soundbite and then I'll get your view on it.
And I think that the time of European idleness has come to an end. The new initiatives in which we are participating together with Germany are, I think, very clear proof of this. Together we are taking responsibility for economic recovery in Europe. Three guiding themes stand over this trip. We want to build a strategic partnership, we want to strengthen our bilateral relations, and we want to work together for peace and stability in the region.
Right, so that was the Polish finance minister, Mr. Domański. Now let's hear what the German finance minister had to say.
We must become faster, more resilient and more flexible. We have set ourselves a goal of deepening European cooperation, picking up the pace and demanding the same from the Commission. European sovereignty is our top priority.
Right, so you're getting a real sense of energy from what both of those ministers are saying in terms of working together and moving forward together. Tell us a little bit about what's happening.
So what we're seeing here today, Hashim, is that on Monday, the German finance minister, Lars Klingbeil, met with Andrzej Domański, the Polish finance minister, here in Warsaw. And really what's being discussed at these meetings is the need to revive Europe's economic competitiveness. Because we see, and this is a trend that has not only been going on for the past few years, but even decades, that Europe has consistently underperformed both the US and China, not only when it comes to GDP growth, but also when it comes to overall competitiveness, whether it be tax competitiveness, innovation, with China and the United States being the two clear global leaders when it comes to the AI and AI technologies. So this is an effort to get Europe and its economy to become more competitive in the face of these two superpowers, effectively, because we see that Europe's role in the world has consistently diminished from an economic perspective. Europe used to have an economic weight on par with the United States back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Today, the European economy is consistently lagging further behind the US, and China is outpacing Europe as well on numerous different sectors. So it's really an effort for Europe
catch up,
to regain
really,
that,
economically.
Yes,
Okay, so Ms. Domański kind of alluded to, the fact that basically Europe has been a little bit lazy in this regard. What has changed the dynamic? What is behind this change, this movement, this working together, this energy that suddenly appeared?
Well, I think it's in many ways a wake-up call because I think European politicians, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who we'll talk about in a little bit, have come to realize just how far Europe has fallen behind the US, China in economic matters. Europe is increasingly dependent on countries like China for critical raw materials for semiconductors, which are in turn used in the European automotive industry. And overall, there's a lack of dynamism in the European economy if you compare it to the United States with all the new tech firms, startups, the AI innovation taking place in the US and also in China. So there's this effort for Europe to regain its competitiveness and also its kind of standing in the world that it once had.
Okay, so tell us what this means in practical terms for Poland and for other countries in Central and Eastern Europe.
Well, I think with increased cooperation, you have to keep in mind, Hashim, that European economies, and especially Central European economies, are inherently linked. We are very much economically interconnected with Germany and by extension Western Europe and the rest of the European Union. So greater cooperation within the framework of the European Union would really help to kind of streamline that economic regeneracy, if you could say, of the entire...
Yeah, but cooperation in what way? Can you be more specific?
Well, I think if we streamline our economic priorities or monetary priorities, things like tech and artificial intelligence, if we coordinate our efforts to better, in a sense, catch up to the United States, to China, and really get back into the league of being top innovators in the world when it comes to the latest technologies, I think that's what the two ministers were really aiming at Monday's meeting.
Right, so you mentioned tech, you mentioned AI. Are there any other areas, for example, the automotive industry, which of course is huge in the region?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that because for decades, German car makers and the German auto industry was really, in many ways, the envy of the world when it comes to technology, innovativeness. If you look at companies like BMW or Mercedes or Audi, Porsche. But what we've seen in the past couple of years especially is that China has really emerged as a top player in the automotive sector, especially when it comes to electric vehicles. And at the same time, as the U.S. has put trade barriers on China, China is shifting its exports increasingly toward Europe. And not just toward Europe, but also Asia, Africa, other parts of the world in response to the tariffs. That in turn has led to a flood of Chinese cars and electric vehicles into Europe, which has undermined the competitiveness of the traditional European automakers like Renault, BMW, or Mercedes.
So what's this cooperation going to do to address that challenge?
Well, I think I'm not fully aware of the individual details myself, given that this is an evolving development that we're seeing in Europe. But there will be concrete steps taken for governments to work together in order to find ways to increase competitiveness, whether it be by reducing red tape and regulations, because that's been a massive burden for the region's economies, especially if you look at Germany, reducing things like taxes, increasing innovation, increasing private sector and public sector investment into parts of the economy. And all of those things, I think, could eventually help Europe level the playing field with America and with China.
So basically streamlining the economies, for example, by getting rid of the overregulation and the red tape, if you like, and thereby attracting more investment in key areas. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, that's absolutely correct, because if you look especially at the major Western European economies, and Germany is a prime example of this, but if you look at the burden that the welfare system, that red tape, excessive bureaucracy has had on the German economy, that has been one of the main factors behind Germany's economic slowdown and the underperformance of Europe as a whole, particularly Western Europe, compared to the United States, not to mention China.
Okay, now let's zoom out a little bit. What does this mean in the context of the European Union? Can we expect to see more of these meetings, more of these engagements happening with other countries as well?
Well, given the way that the winds are blowing, and Chancellor Merz in Germany is another example of this, I feel like there has been really an acceleration or greater awareness on the part of European politicians, the fact that Europe needs to catch up. And I think we've seen more of these meetings take place, not just bilateral meetings, but on the European Commission level, the European Council level. Just the past week, I was actually in Hamburg, Germany, to attend the North Sea Summit, as it was called. It was a gathering of ministers from several countries bordering the North Sea, in addition to others like Ireland and Iceland, where they are planning to coordinate their efforts toward investing in wind energy in the North Sea and to kind of transform the North Sea into Europe's premier region of supplying energy to the rest of Europe. So I think there has been an increase in these initiatives, and I think European politicians are more aware now than they've ever been of some of the challenges that are at stake here.
Right. Well, talking about challenges and staying with Germany, Chancellor Merz has just been visiting the Middle East. I think we have a short soundbite from him as well coming up.
Three guiding themes stand over this trip. We want to build a strategic partnership, we want to strengthen our bilateral relations, and we want to work together for peace and stability in the region.
Right. So, a trip to the Middle East by the German Chancellor. What's that all about?
Well, I think we've seen countries like India and China make deals all over the world. India in particular is another example of this, because India has been increasingly reaching out to its BRICS partners, Russia and China, as we've seen with the Shanghai summit back in September. So I think this is an effort for Europe to strengthen its coordination with other parts of the world. And when it comes to Germany in particular, Germany is an economy that for a long time had been dependent on cheap Russian energy. And that, of course, came to an abrupt end with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so part of this trip is to secure new energy deals in the Middle East. Another part...
For Germany?
Yes, for Germany, and I think for Europe more broadly as well, given...
Well, yeah, tell me about that. What do you mean for Europe more broadly? Do you expect other countries to do the same, or the EU to go out to the Middle East and have these
Well, I
conversations?
think the EU has sort of had a wake-up call these past few years, and it's not just Germany. Many countries had long been reliant on Russian energy, and we're seeing increased partnership with other countries in the world, particularly large oil producers, and there's plenty of those in the Middle East, to find an alternate source of that energy supply. We've seen increased shipments of American LNG to Europe. Potentially, we could see more shipments from the Middle East, depending on how events play out in the coming years. But what this trip is also about is to, in a way, a geopolitical partnership, to find a strategic, consistent partner for Europe in a world and at a time when relations with the U.S. are anything but certain, as we've seen. And of course, there is the threat from the East when it comes to Russia. China is a rising power, exerting more economic influence over Eurasia. So I think it's, in a way, an opportunity to establish greater ties with a certain region of the world that could mutually benefit both Europe in addition to itself.
Right, so basically securing energy supplies from that region is the key driver behind the visit. Is there anything else that they'll be talking about?
So there's several other factors. Chancellor Merz is there to, in reference to the situation taking place in Iran. Now, I'm not an expert on the geopolitics of the Middle East myself, but there is that is a factor in his visit. There is the factor of, as I mentioned before, strengthening economic partnerships with those countries, ensuring broader peace, not just in the Middle East, but also when it comes to the war in Ukraine. We see, of course, that in Abu Dhabi, talks have been taking place between Ukrainians, Russians, and Americans, trying to find a peace plan for that part of the world. So I think it's a broader economic and also a geopolitical maneuver that's taking place here.
Right, so basically engaging the Middle East at a number of different levels. Do you expect this to be replicated by other countries within Europe?
Well, I would say Germany obviously has long been one of the biggest players economically and politically in Europe. I think the fact that Chancellor Merz is heading down there is quite significant. Potentially, we might see a similar initiative from Emmanuel Macron of France or Keir Starmer of Britain, maybe even potentially Donald Tusk, or a Polish politician. But I think this is a start when it comes to broadening Europe's traditional relationship with different regions of the world and reaching out to the Middle East, a region that maybe has not been as close to Europe in past decades as America has, for instance.
Right, and finally, before we move on, what's in it for these countries in the Middle East? Of course, they get to sell the energy, but I mean, there's no shortage of buyers of that. So what's in it for them to be dealing with Germany and Europe?
Well, I think many countries around the world, and I go back to India because that's another prominent example that I tend to reference with Narendra Modi and his diplomatic efforts. I think many countries in the world are looking for win-win economic partnerships, opportunities and deals where both the recipient and the country involved can benefit economically, where the people can benefit, trade deals, business opportunities. And I think that's a very important part of economic diplomacy, to find those win-win partnerships where one country could provide another bloc of countries with what they need and vice versa.
Understood. Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but there is another area I want to touch on, and we're talking about European economics. Bulgaria. They adopted the euro on the 1st of January this year. I think we have a short soundbite or graphic. We don't. Okay, that's not on the cards. Tell us about how that transition is going from the lev to the euro in Bulgaria.
So in 2 words, I would say the transition so far has been unexpectedly well. We see, and there's not a whole lot of data that has been released yet, but based on the preliminary inflation data that we've seen from Bulgaria, Contrary to what many people were expecting, that there would be this sudden increase, massive surge in prices in Bulgaria, we've actually seen a decline in the rate of inflation from 5% down to, I believe, 3.6 or 3.7%.
Yeah, we can see the numbers
Yes.
here now on the screen. Yeah,
and that's coincided with an overall drop in inflation in the Eurozone as a whole, which has added to relieve the pressure on Bulgaria as well. But I think the important thing to mention here, Bulgaria's situation is a bit unique compared to past Eurozone entrants like Croatia or Montenegro that adopted the euro in years past. It's the fact that Bulgaria's currency, the lev, has had a currency pegged to the euro since 1999. So the two currencies have actually been inextricably linked at a value of roughly 2 to 1 since 1999.
right. So they move together.
Yes. And that, I think, has helped to smoothen the transition from the lev to the euro, which officially took place on January 1st.
Right. So it's going well. How does this help economically in Bulgaria?
Well, I think it strengthens the country's financial integration with the EU. I think it's going to make it easier for EU businesses and firms to conduct business in Bulgaria now that you have a single common currency. You will no longer have to transition between levs and euros and vice versa.
So the translation risk and so on.
Yes. So it strengthens economic integration with Bulgaria and the Eurozone countries. The one downside to not having your own currency that I should mention here is that Bulgaria will no longer have its own monetary policy because it will be dependent on the whims of the European Central Bank when it comes to setting interest rates and when it comes to setting monetary policy. And this is something that countries like Poland, Hungary, or the Czech Republic don't have to deal with because they still have their own currencies and their own independent monetary policies.
Right. Okay. So what is the potential in Bulgaria? It's one of the poorer countries in Europe. What do we expect growth areas to be?
So it's interesting that you mentioned Bulgaria has, out of all the countries in the Balkans, they've tend to be known as a country that practices very sound finances and economics. Now, while I don't have the exact projection for GDP growth this year, we know that historically the government has been very careful when it comes to exercising its economic policies. Bulgaria actually went through a major financial crisis in the 1990s with hyperinflation, and that's part of the reasons why the currency pegged to the euro was instituted. But despite the fact that the political situation in Bulgaria right now is anything but stable, economically the country seems to be at a decent footing.
A decent footing, a good place to end our conversation. Maciej, thank you very much indeed for sharing your analysis with our audience. That brings us to the end of this episode News in Depth. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.